All right, cool. I think we might be live. Welcome to another Sunday morning live stream, and thanks for joining me. This is going to be a super casual stream today. Today we're going to be making some chilled out Dubby Techno using the AKAI Force. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Looks like it says my chat might be disconnected, so I'm not 100% sure if we are live. Let's see here. See if I can find the stream on my channel here and find out if I'm actually live or not, because I can't see the chat this morning in OBS. So let's, or rather in the YouTube app, that is. Looks like 9 watching. All right, fantastic. Let's see here. Cool. We got Sky Tortoise Ferryman in the chat. We got Wall in the chat. Can you guys hear me? Loud and clear. Thank you very much. All right. Thanks, Connor. Let's see here. Okay, I've got a bunch of extra windows open today, so please bear with me. The reason for that is today is the first 3 camera shoot that I've been, or live stream rather, that I've been able to get set up. And let me see if we can test out these 3 cameras here. Okay, we've got the overhead cam. And lastly, I borrowed my wife's iPhone, and I'm using that as a 3rd cam here in the back of the room. Hopefully all of those cameras are coming through just fine. All right. We got Musicer apps in the chat. Fantastic. All right. Unfortunately, my chat isn't showing up in... That's really odd. So I'm just going to, I guess, leave that for now, and it's going to be a little difficult to access the chat during the stream, so bear with me on this one. This is going to be a super casual stream today. What we've got is we've got a bunch of gear on the desk right now that I'm creating this Dubby Techno groove out of. I'm going to go ahead and turn the volume up just a little bit here on this groove that we're going to be messing with today. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear that okay. Let me explain to you, the components that are making up this little groove that we're listening to. The kick drum is coming out of the Quasi MIDI Revolution 309, as well as a hi-hat sound. We're getting the main Dub Techno Chord stab out of a Quasi MIDI Quasar rack mount over here. And that's also being run through the Erica Synth's Acid Box filter to get a little bit of extra movement on that chord stab. We also have the Roland TR-8S in the mix today, and that's putting out a whole bunch of extra drum sounds, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then we have the Quasi MIDI Sirius, which is putting out sort of like a chilled pad sound. On top of that, we have the AKAI MPC Live, which is only putting out a crash or impact sound today. Alright. I don't have the chat on my normal screen. Let's see if I can't get this open on YouTube over here. Alright, hey Sean, alright. Can you guys hear my voice okay over the music? It's a little bit strange for me today because we've got multiple cameras. What we're going to do here is go ahead and switch to the, there we go. I'm using the Novation SL MK3 again today as the main sequencer. This is sequencing all of these grooves together. Let me go ahead and switch this camera back to the one in the back here. And what we're going to be doing today is basically the same type of thing that we were doing last week. If you joined me on the live stream last week, we had a desk full of hardware and we recorded those pieces out individually into an AKAI MPC Live. Today we're going to be doing basically that exact type of thing, except we're going to be using the AKAI Force today so that I can show you some of the differences in those 2 boxes. And we're just going to have a little bit of fun writing some Dubby Techno. Let's see here. Okay, so let me show you some of these other drum sounds that we can bring in and out using the Roland TR-8S here. All right. So I've got like a clap sound in here. That's coming from the TR-8S. Got this ride sound. That's also coming from the TR-8S, and I can bring these in and out. Here's our basic main groove. And this is a really, really typical kind of standard dub techno type of groove with the big chord stabs coming over the top of it. I can mute the hi-hat here that's coming out of the quasi-MIDI Revolution. We can add some hats in from the TR-8S over here. We can also add some shakers. We can add a rim shot. Kind of low in the background of the mix there. We can also add a low tom to help our groove. Bring that 909 ride back in. Got a snare sound here. So that's the groove that we are working with today. And I've already done the busy work, the boring stuff. I've already sampled out all of these individual elements, and I've taken the time to go ahead and recreate that groove already for us inside of the AKAI Force. Take a listen to this, guys. Voice is a little bit low. Cool. Got a little bit better on the voice, I hope. So I've already got these elements here on the desk already recorded out, so we don't need to take the first hour of today's session and sort of recreate the groove. What we're going to be doing today instead is we're going to be moving the AKAI Force over to the main section of the desk and continuing to work on this groove that I've already got set up. Okay. Let's see here. So I think the best way to approach this is to go ahead and just start breaking this stuff down and bringing it over to the other side of the room. I've got this camera on a tripod that I can move super easily. Oops, sorry about the camera movement there. And we're going to try to make it so we can actually see what's going on today as we break this stuff down. I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. We're going to bring these volumes down on those two tracks so that all you're hearing is my voice. Hopefully you can still hear my voice, okay? And we're going to go ahead and just start turning all of these devices off. Now, one of the reasons that I like to do this type of thing, you know, fill my desk up with gear, and then sort of, let me shut down, and then sort of record all of that gear into like another box so that we are only working with one box, is, you know, pretty much we can go ahead and start actually mixing and producing things. We're no longer just kind of concerned about bringing elements together and sort of finding some sounds and creating a groove. Now what we're going to be actually working on is taking that sort of a 8-bar loop, rather, sort of like a idea, like a sketch per se, and we're going to be doing more of turning that into an actual finished piece of music. So I'm going to go ahead and keep breaking this down, and we're going to move all of this stuff out of the way here. I think that a lot of the YouTubers these days are really focused on the idea that creating music is supposed to be fast and creating music is supposed to be easy, but I don't necessarily agree with that philosophy when creating music. I really like to take the extra time and the extra effort to do stuff like this. where we can. Let me move this camera so you guys can maybe see a little bit. Nope, not so much. Okay. So it's going to be a little bit off the cuff today and a little bit unpolished as we continue moving stuff off the desk. As you know, as people really do. I don't think that necessarily everybody just has all their stuff set up in a perfect setup and nothing ever changes and nothing ever gets messy. I think things change all the time and that things get messy all the time. And that's kind of what I want to show today is the reality of, you know, what I'm actually doing behind the scenes here when the cameras are off. Okay. Now, I'm not going to take a whole bunch of time and completely clean off the desk or anything like that. We're just going to make enough room. Whoops. Whoops. Sorry about that. So that we can bring over the AKAI Force here. Okay. This mic always makes me sound like I'm breathing really heavy, but unfortunately, if I breathe at all, it's just like on the mic, you know, because it's so close to my face here. All right. We are almost there, and I thank you for your patience today. Hey, what's happening, Blue Sunset? Thanks for tuning in. Go ahead and fire the... Oh, whoops, I need to rather plug this in down the bottom side. Just plug it here for now, I think. Cool. Okay, got a lot of extra cables on the desk today, but I'm going to attempt to move the camera down a little bit closer here to the AKAI so that we can actually see the screen and see what we're working with. All right. Hey, what's happening, Gaz? Thanks for tuning in. Cool, man. All right, so bear with me as we get on down here. And I'll try to center this a little bit if I can. All right. So, yeah, tons of extra cords and stuff on the desk today because we're not going to worry about that specifically. Just trying to turn the pad brightness down a tiny little bit so it looks better on the camera for us there. And let's go back to the mixer and the launch mode. Cool. Let's go ahead and plug this in so that we can get some audio. I'm being pretty messy today with the cables so that we don't take forever to get this set up and going. All right. And let's see here. Just gonna make a level adjustment here real fast. Cool. All right. Let's see if I can't grab my chair and get moved over here. On the volume, everyone. Can you hear me? Let's see here. I think I might be a little bit low still. I'm going to turn my level up just a tiny little bit there. Check, check, 1, 2. Okay. All right. Okay, let me see if I can now fix the angle on this guy just a little bit here so that I can still talk to you guys. Okay, am I still in the shot? Fantastic. All right, so there we go. We're all switched over now to the AKAI Force on the desk. And, let's assume that I've got some of the other things cleared away as I would. And that's sort of the point in doing all of this stuff. Now I've got, it took 8 different devices being on the desk to create that groove. And now we're down to just one box on the desk that's playing back the groove. Take a little sip of coffee here, getting a little bit of dry mouth as we get started. And with something like this, with our groove being in just one box, it makes it super easy to take one box out to do a show. It makes it super easy to do something like take this box to a studio that has better monitoring system than maybe you do, or if you don't have any monitor speakers. It's a great way to get your music on some other speakers by just taking your box now to some other studio to do maybe a little bit of mixing and finalizing there. It's also fantastic if you're collabing with friends, if you've got friends that have synth studios and you want to just, maybe take something you've created over there and have them add to it, or maybe if they've got better synthesizers than you do, you can record those into the box, stuff like that. Let's see here. I made a bunch of notes as to what I'd like to work on specifically today. And so let's go ahead and see what we've got. Actually, before we get into working, let me see if I can explain a little bit about the AKAI Force for those of you who aren't familiar with it. It's basically a very similar engine to the AKAI MPC Live that we worked with last week, if you were on that stream, but it's a much more visual box, I think. Up here in the top, we've got a screen that is a touch screen, and then down here, we've got a whole bunch of pads that we can interact with. And what we've got is each row of pads is a track. And each of these little, each column of here is a individual track. And then the rows, the little individual rows, represent what we're calling clips. And what is a clip? A clip is basically just the sequencer information that tells the sound how it should play. And one of the neat things about the AKAI Force is there's several different ways that we can approach creating in this. We can load just straight up loops to each of these pads and then turn them on and off by just touching the pads and bringing in different loops and really interacting with it as a real-time loop box. Or we can create individual tracks of individual drum machines by bringing in samples onto those pads in the drum machines and have a track for the kick drum, have a track for our hi-hats and top sounds like rides and shakers and tambourines, have an individual track here for our snares and clap sounds. Got a track here for a sub-bass sound. The next track over is for pads. The next track over is for the chord stabs. Then I have an empty track, which we may or may not need today. And lastly, we have a track where I can house the effects. Now, for those of you who watched last week's stream, we were working on the AKAI MPC Live, and that has 16 pads on it. But it's really the same engine, basically, as this type of a unit, except for the number of pads that are visible and, the main workflow and how you actually interact with the unit. What we can do here is we can either kind of make the we can either set it up so that we can do the arranging in real time by turning off individual clips in real time as we want to, or we can use this sort of like if you're familiar with the scenes mode inside of Ableton Live, which is we create whichever clips we want to play together, and then we can launch them all at the same time as each other. So basically, each row becomes like a scene in Ableton, and that's just a collection of clips. So for instance, our first clip on the kick track is a sequence that's programming the kick track to do its thing. The next clip is a sequence of, of notes that's telling the sounds on this track to, how to play back, etc., etc. And we can, even if we're trying to launch these together at any time on any track, all you have to do is press any clip, and on the downbeat of the next measure, that clip will start playing instead. So as far as real-time interaction, this box I think has a lot to offer over the AKAI MPC Live. But it's all just about preferences and workflow. For instance, this box is not battery powered. You're either going to need like a really serious portable battery, or you're going to need wall power for something like this. Whereas, the MPC Live has a battery built into it. So that alone, is a huge difference between these two boxes. Let me show you how I've broken down the individual sounds here. Excuse me, I'm just having another sip of my coffee. On the very first track, I can go into note mode, and basically, note mode is very similar to how we worked with the AKAI last week. It just puts the pads for this track up on the screen, and then we're able to load a sample to any one of these 64 pads that we want to. If we, for some reason, fill up the pads, we can actually put like shift and up or something, and we get access to the rest of the pads. So there's 2 sets of 64 pads in every single bank, just like the AKAI MPC Live. Last week with the AKAI MPC Live, we put all of our samples that we recorded into just one bank, and we just spread them out across the pads. But this week, it's so much more visual to use the Force with individual tracks that is how I've laid out these samples. We start out here with the kick drum. This is a pretty dirty, old school kick drum that I got from the Quasi MIDI Revolution. Pretty funky. Next to it, we just have another variation of that, slight difference on those. Over here, we have a low toms, like an 808 low tom. And the reason that it's on the same track as the kick drums is that it kind of falls into that same frequency spectrum. And the tom sort of works with the kick to create a low-end groove. In fact, what I can do is I can mute all of the other tracks except for the kick, and we can go ahead and play that. So here we have the kick and a low tom sound. Can you guys still hear my voice okay now that I've moved over to this side and we've got the audio coming out of this box okay? Hey, what's happening? Head nods, flying oscillator circus. All right. Let's see here. Let's bring in the next track, shall we? So basically on the next track, if I mute our kick, we can hear that our next track is, I've got this labeled tops. And what I consider tops is basically any drum sound that's not the kick and not a snare. So hats, shakers, ride, basically. And that's playing here all together. We're going to make a lot of variations of these tops so that they're not always playing all of those sounds at the same time. On the next track over, I've gone ahead and put some claps and also the snare that we sampled out of the 808 there. Let's see here. What am I doing wrong? I'm muting those, aren't I? What I want to do is select. No. What am I doing wrong here? There we go. Fantastic. So next over on the third track, I've separated out the claps. Just a little bit difference in the sounds there. And that's one of the things that I love about these AKAI boxes, especially the Force. You've got so many empty pads here that whenever you want to make any type of a variation on a sound, it's super easy. Let's say I want to make a, variation on this clap sound. I just, hold the copy button, touch the pad, and put it on any other pad I want to. And then there's the clap sound. And now I can, maybe put a new filter on this or change the volume or change the panning. And then I have, 2 different sounds. And that's what I've done here with these claps. And here there's a little bit of variation in those clap sounds. is that rim shot and our snare sound. Next over is actually an internal synth from inside of the Force. And if we go in, we can bring up, unfortunately, my screen is a little bit bright still for this camera. I wonder if I can, hold on one second, and I wonder if I can change the settings here let's see here, on the Brio filter, and I wonder if we can. I don't see it. No. Sorry, the screen up top is a little bright, but this is a built-in synthesizer. The Force has a few different built-in synthesizers. And I'm using this for the sub-bass sound today. If you can't hear that, put your headphones on. Just kind of a nice low sound there. And let's see here. Next over, whoops. We've got the pad that I sampled out of the Quasi-MIDI Sirius. It's just a really standard, kind of an old school 90s sounding pad. Got a little bit of a filter sweep on it there. The sample on the left is a lower octave of the same chord, and the sample on the right is just that same chord played an octave higher on the keyboard, so that we can go back and forth between those two samples. Yeah, the difference really between the Push 2 and the AKAI Force is that the Push 2 is just a MIDI controller, whereas the AKAI Force is a standalone production workstation that has all of the tools inside that you need to make full finished music without a computer. To use the AKAI Force as a MIDI controller, for instance, is kind of like driving a Lamborghini in the slow lane, for example, because everything you need to create music is inside of this box, all of the tools as a completely standalone unit. So I haven't really gotten into using it with Ableton per se, because I would much rather just use the Push. The AKAI MPC-1 is very similar to the Force and very similar to the MPC Live. They're just different shells, basically, to house their same operating system. In fact, the MPC-1 is very similar to just the more square form factor of the Force, but the pad layout of the MPC Live. But the engine inside of these is all pretty much the exact same engine. So there we have those two pads that we sampled out of the Sirius. Next over on the next track, I have the main Dubby Techno Chord stamps that I sampled out of the Quasi-MIDI Quasar. And the neat thing about the AKAI engines is that you can actually put up to 4 different samples on every single pad, and then you can tell the pad how it should play back those samples. And so in this case, I've loaded 4 variations of a chord stab onto one pad, and I've told the pad that every time I hit it, it should randomly choose which of those 4 samples it plays back. How I've done this is I sampled 7 different chord variations here out of the Quasar when I did the actual recording. Let me play those for you now so you can hear the subtle differences between these samples. Whoops. So it's really difficult to hear, but in these first 3 samples, there's a tiny little bit of, I'm talking tiny little bit, of difference on the filter cutoff. This one is a little bit more open on the filter than these first 2. That one's just kind of another variation. That one has the filter lower than the other 2. Yet another more lower filter setting on that one. And also pretty low on that one. So I just picked 4 of these and I loaded them onto this one pad and told it every time I hit the pad, randomly choose one of those to play back. This gets a little bit more life and movement sort of into our groove by default. Check this out when I hit the pad, how it changes the sound. hear those subtle differences in like the filter cutoff? That's all because we've got the different samples onto this one pad here. For instance, here we can see that I've loaded stab 1, stab 2, stab 6, and stab 4 onto this one pad. And then if we go over to the LFO modulation tab, I can tell those two just that the layers should play back randomly. I really love that feature, to be able to put, you know, like a variation of the same sound onto a pad and have those trigger a little bit randomly. Next up, we have just an empty track that we can put anything we want on if we need to work on that later. And lastly, on track 8, I've got some effects sounds. I've done the same sort of trick that we just did with that chord sample on our main impact sound, and that is I've loaded 4 different impact sounds to this one pad. If I click that here, we can go to the second samples tab. We can see that I've loaded a noise impact. I've loaded my go-to down filter sound, and also a Zildjian crash cymbal. I've actually got that noise burst in here 2 times so that it might trigger a little bit more often than the other 2 sounds. So there's a crash. But there we have kind of a down filter sound. And there we have sort of a noise burst impact. And those will just randomly select from those 4 samples every time we hit this pad. Again, giving us that tiny little bit of, you know, life and movement that's just built into the groove by default. Underneath this here, I have some sort of up filters and risers that I created in Ableton Live and then brought over here for us to maybe work with today. Just to kind of create those ebb and flows and to get a little bit of, you know, risers to create some tension in the mix. That one might be a little low in volume still. These aren't in the mix, they're just loaded so we can work with them if we want to. There's a big 8-bar riser. Here it just keep going up there. I'm not going to play you all of the risers, but again, something like this is really, really useful for creating the tension and release in your music. When we want to create a change up in the groove, we might do a nice build up to that change up so that when that change up happens, it has a little bit more emphasis. That it's all in the box. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, that's a lot of people like to have their stuff all spread out over the table, and that's fine. But I actually have more gear in this room that I can fit on the table, and I really just like to create, you know, pull out stuff and put stuff together, maybe pick a sequencer to start sequencing that stuff together with. But then when I hit a limitation where it's not super easy to start adding more sounds to that mix. Maybe all my MIDI channels are used up, or maybe I don't have any extra inputs on the mixer. Something like that is a really great opportunity to start recording that's all those individual elements out and then actually changing that from just, you know, a live jam with a bunch of gear spilled out over your desk into an actual finished, mixed, and produced track. Now, if you're not into making like a finished track and you're really interested in the live jam aspect of it as well, you just sort of set it up that way when you're building it in the Force. And again, that's one of the things that I really love about this particular unit is that you can set it up so many different ways. I really like to, you know, you guys know I like to get in there and do a lot of the programming beforehand so that I can pretty much just play back a track as I intended it to play back. So I've sort of set that up here inside of the Force already. I've got different clips on the different tracks. Let's go ahead and see what this sounds like if we sort of play this arrangement from the beginning. We start off with only one clip being activated on this whole row, and that is our pad sound. Now when that gets 1 bar from the end, I hit launch over here, and on the downbeat of the next measure, it launches these clips, which now add, you know, this sort of top groove with the hi-hats. And we add our main chord stab, Then I triggered the next scene, which brings in our kick drum, which brings in our bass line. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have the full groove going. We have extra clap, we have extra snare happening, we've got the rim shot going with our percussion. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we sort of break it down a little bit, and we take out the main chords, and we just sort of start grooving along with the drums in their full form, and the pad just sort of chilling out a little bit. And that's a pretty nice section for us to start working from today, I think. Can you guys hear me okay over the music? Let's see here. Any limitations the Force have that I find frustrating? Actually, let's see here. When the Force first came out, it really didn't do like maybe half of the things that they had advertised that it was going to do. The biggest situation at that time was that the system that controlled the MIDI inside of the box just wasn't functioning at all. The Force has 2 MIDI inputs, if I'm not mistaken. In just one, actually. The MPC Live has the 2, sorry. But what the deal was is that you couldn't use these in conjunction with your other gear because you couldn't assign the MIDI channel. So when it came out, and for about the first, I don't know, year and a half of this unit's life, if you would plug in a MIDI from an external sequencer or an external synthesizer, it would trigger every single track, all 8 tracks. So you weren't really able to get this into like a robot. It wasn't able to be the center of your studio, like the main brain, like you would want it to be. But they have been working on that and working on that and working on that. And on the last update, it's taken care of. And it absolutely works a charm now, both for the Force and for the MPC Live. We have full multi-timbral MIDI routing. You can plug in MIDI via USB, and you can plug in 5-pin MIDI, and you can route any of the tracks to any channel so that you can use this with any of your external gear, either as the master or as a slave in the chain with something else controlling it, and it works fantastically. Another thing, though, that is important to note, I think, for the Force is that AKAI likes to kind of pitch these as a DJ tool to DJs. I'm not exactly sure why, other than, you know, just another customer base they can maybe sort of tap into. But I don't really think that's understood what they mean when they start trying to say, you know, hey, DJs, you can use this. Because DJs typically work with full-length tracks, and sometimes they work with stems of full-length tracks. What a stem is it's like if you break the track down into its basic components, like, you know, for the full track, you might separate out the kick drum, and then the hats, and then maybe the bass, and then maybe the melodic elements, so that you've got 4 tracks playing a full song and not just one. But what happens if you try to load like 4 5-minute stems into a box like this is that's like 20 minutes of full quality stereo audio, and it just fills up the memory like that, and people then complain that it doesn't have enough memory. But the problem is it's just really not meant to work that way. These AKAI boxes they don't stream the samples from the hard disk. So once you fill up their internal memory, that's all there is to say about that. AKAI claims that these boxes have 2 gigs of RAM, of memory, but you can't use all of that RAM for sample loading. Some of that RAM is necessary to actually run the system as well. So you can't get 2 gigs of, you know, pristine audio in these boxes. That being said, if you're just working with loops and one-shots, the way these boxes are actually meant to be used, you're not going to run into any sort of a problem at all. I built a 20-minute live set inside of the Force that had over 200 4-bar loops in it, and I still had plenty of time left over to add new sounds and whatnot, sampling time. So as long as you're not trying to load full-length stems into these, I mean, you can see like you're meant to load tons and tons of little sounds in here. You're not meant to load like just four, full-length tracks and then leave 1,000 empty, pads with nothing on them. That's just not really the workflow. So I don't find that a limitation personally because I work with shorter loops and samples, but if you're looking to do any sort of that DJ type stuff where you're going to put a full track in here, that's when the limitations start really showing up. I hope that makes any sense. Can I show you the synth engine? Actually, I don't see any reason why not. Let's go ahead and go over here and check it out. Let me just grab a sip of coffee. There's some different synthesizers that come built into the Force, and that is definitely a bonus because not a lot of samplers typically come with synthesizers built into them. I don't think that these are like the best synthesizers in like the history of ever or anything like that, but they are absolutely usable. And let's see here, if I go or maybe double click on cool, there's let's see here, we've got I haven't updated the most recent update, which actually includes a drum synthesizer in here. A friend of mine said you got to play with that because it's really amazing, but I just haven't had enough hours in the day to test that out yet. So what I have here is we have four synthesizers who are built that are built into the Force. We've got a baseline synthesizer. Let me go ahead and select that here, and then if I hit Shift and clip, it brings the face of that up. Unfortunately, I've got the screen already as dim as it will go, and it's still a little bit too bright for this camera here. But this is basically just a little built-in synthesizer, and these come with presets and whatnot, so that you can start getting some sounds right off the jump. This is basically their 303 emulation type of synth here, and if I go into note mode, it turns the whole screen into a keyboard. Let me go back to the mixer so that I can bring the volume on that down because I have my other tracks a bit lower. And let's see, if we go back to Shift Clip, we can scroll through some of those presets. I'm not going to program anything out on this today. And I really don't get a lot of use out of the inbuilt synthesizers. But because I have so many other synthesizers in here that I'm typically sampling in. But these are definitely usable. Let's go ahead and go back to the matrix, and if I double click this, I can change what synthesizer that's actually playing. Their big synth that they're real proud of is called the Hype synth, and it's a pretty robust sounding synthesizer. It's got quite a few different pages of controls here. I mean, it's a legitimate synthesizer. We can get in here and mess with the oscillators as much as we want, even do some sound design. And let's see here. By default, let me bring that mixer up maybe just a touch. This is a polyphonic synth. Another thing for me personally is I haven't really gelled super a lot with playing the pads this way. I still kind of prefer to play, like when I'm actually getting in there and playing stuff, I still kind of prefer to, use like an actual synthesizer. But one of the things that we can do is see if I can remember how to do this. Is we can, I'm not sure I remember how to do this. We can set the scale of this track so that it's not a chromatic, but rather any note that we press will be in key with our track. I just don't remember exactly how to do that. What was it, like Shift and Track? Nope, that's Launch Quantize. It doesn't matter because we're not going to spend a lot of time in the engine today. But you can definitely, whoops, hold on, and let me make sure we're highlighted there, and Shift, Clip. Cool. Let me play some of these other presets from this synth so you can kind of hear some of the sounds that it can make. Pads and stuff. Like a pluck sound. like a lead sound. Some pizzicatos. Now, the Hype synthesizer is not in the MPC Live. I don't know if they're going to add this one to the MPC Live, but the other and less complex synthesizers are included in that box. We've got some octave strings here. I mean, these sounds are actually pretty good. And if I didn't have, external synthesizers and Ableton and, Contact and all those kind of options, I would definitely be getting a lot more use out of this. These internal synthesizers. A little super saw there. There's a piano. And that's really not bad, you know what I'm saying? So you can get quite a few, of your sounds from their built-in synthesizers if you want to use them. Let's see here, but we're not going to be worrying about that today. So what I am going to do is just delete that extra track for now and scroll back over. I want to make it clear, though, that we're not limited to 8 tracks. We can go ahead and keep loading more tracks. We're just loaded 8 tracks here because it's really easy for me to work with that way. We're also not limited to this sort of 64 launch grid here. We can just use these arrows and we can just start scrolling down and adding as many clips as we want until we max out the memory. If we want to add more tracks, we just start scrolling over to the right and we can just keep adding more tracks. But I find that when I'm, working with it, it's really easy to kind of keep everything sort of visually together where all of the tracks are on the screen at the same time. I also find that because specifically, I'm working in these drum machines, I have plenty of empty pads on every single track. So if I need to add more sounds, we don't really need to add a whole other track in the mix. We can just sort of pick the most appropriate, sampler and then load those new sounds onto these pads. Cool. Let's go ahead and see about these notes that I've written here. And one of the things I wanted to do today was to make sure we create a kick drum clip that is not on the floor, not a 4 on the floor pattern. Excuse me. So this is really easy to create variations in the clips. Again, the clip is just the MIDI information that is telling how the drums should play back inside of that sampler. And again, think of every single track as its own sampler, with 128 pads. So you can use your choice of samplers or just, loop playback. I don't really recommend using their loop playback though, because you can't get individual EQ control over the loops. That's why I like to use the drum pads specifically, because when we load, let's say we want to load a sample onto a pad, we'll pick any pad arbitrarily, right? How about over here? I'll just hit edit and touch that pad. Then I could load a sample onto that pad. And we get up to 4 different effect slots that I can add onto that one individual pad. So I can put EQs or separate, phasers and bit crushers or any of that kind of stuff on the pads individually. For instance, if I open up the effects window, we have channel strips, we have compressors, delays, distortions, we got enhancers, we got filter gates, we got regular filters, we got flangers, frequency shifters, fuzz wahs, kill EQs that we can assign to things like DJ EQs, like kill that low end or drop those highs. We've got a maximizer plugin, which I like to use on the master bus inside of here. It just goes on like this. Look at all these plugins, you guys. This is what I'm talking about when I say doing mixing and mastering outside of the box, and meaning outside of Ableton, because I don't know of any other line of tools that will allow you to put this amount, this robust amount of effects on your pads individually. Again, if I have 64 samples loaded here, each of those samples could have 4 different effects on it. And this is just one bank. We can just keep going and going and going, and just filters. We even have a sidechain compression algorithm, which is implemented here, which wasn't here when the unit was released. Kind of a bummer, but that came in one of the updates. So we have actual sidechain compression inside of this box as well. But what we want to do then is go back over to our, standard view and just copy this 4 on the floor kick drum clip and paste that into like a free clip beneath it. Now if I highlight that clip and get our scene playing here, if I click on clip, we can see that it's just playing a big 4 on the floor pattern. But what I want to do is shift and delete those notes. Shift and delete those notes. What I want to do is I want to make this pad play out in its entirety every time I hit it, rather than having to press down to hold it. Yeah, cool. Now we can go ahead and play this clip. Oops, make sure we're in note mode. Cool. Make sure that this track is armed for recording. I'm going to hit record arm, make sure that I've got this track armed for recording. Now I'll just hit record. Actually, I'm going to hit what I want all of these clips to play together. So I'm going to just copy the whole row of other clips on down so that I've got the whole row playing in sync with itself. Now we're going to make sure that we're in note mode, so I can tap that kick drum. Just going to hit record, and I'm going to let it cycle around. Now if I hit record, it'll take that out of record mode. And now we've got a kick drum pattern that's not playing a 4 on the floor pattern. Now, the neat thing about working in like a clip launching workflow like this is that no matter what scene is playing, at any time we can touch any of these clips, and at the downbeat of the very next measure, that clip will start playing. Or we can launch the whole row of clips by pressing the launch buttons over here on the side, and on the downbeat of the very next measure, the whole row will start playing. So for instance, if I have like this scene playing up here, which doesn't have any kick drum in it, and let's say that I'm treating this as a live jam and not a finished track. What have I done wrong there? Why did that sound so off? 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, and 1. The launch is set a little odd. For some reason, it's starting like almost immediately when I press the clip instead of waiting till the next downbeat. I'm not exactly sure why it's doing that. Launch quantize none. That's why it's doing that. So what I want to do is make sure that it's on 1 bar. Where's that? Launch quantize, shift, and quantize. Is that it? No? Well, I'll have to figure that out. But normally, by default, it's going to trigger the clips that you touch on the downbeat of the very next bar. It's being a little bit screwy today, and I don't remember the exact setting of this. Is quite a deep box. In fact, many people would consider this a full DAW in a box, and I would absolutely agree. I just want to stress that these AKAI boxes, in my opinion, are absolutely the best way to really get in and produce and mix finished music outside of an environment like Ableton, because you really have all of the tools inside of the box that you'll need. So let's see here. I'm going to see if my launch quantization is on 1 bar for the rest of these clips at least. No, it isn't. Sake, I always get frustrated when things go a little bit weird on a live stream and I can't remember exactly how to get what I want. Unfortunately, it's not doing the trigger on the next downbeat setting, but rather I don't want to, like, move to a different computer and start trying to search out how to fix that per se. Why can't I? Oh, shoot. Shift. Quantize selected events. That's not what I want, though. I want it to be a 1 bar launch. Oh, for Pete's sake. I don't remember. All right. Well, we're just going to work around that for now. But we do have our non-4 on the floor kick pattern in. I also want to make a bunch more variations on the percussion part today, because let's see if we mute these tracks. And we go in and play. We can hear that we've got the open hi-hat, we've got a closed hi-hat, we've got a shaker, and we've also got a ride, all happening at the same time. It might be nice if we, had some variations where it was a lot more subtle than this, and we didn't have it all going at the exact same time. So we'll go ahead and just copy that main percussion loop. We're going to go ahead and paste that clip into the, whoops, I'm doing a wrong track there. Paste that into the clip beneath it. And what we're going to do, cool, yeah, is I want to make sure we're selected. Yeah, cool. And if I hit clip, yeah, now we can actually go into the window here, in this little sequencer window where we can see the notes of our pattern here. What I want to do is go ahead and highlight 812. Which one is it? Why am I not hearing that? Are we muted again? Yeah. I want to be over on this track, actually. Yeah, here it is. Cool. I want to be able to delete this ride symbol. So we're going to go ahead and select this ride symbol and delete these and delete. So we can have a variation of this top loop that's not quite so extreme. And let's see here. Yeah, cool. Let's go ahead and get rid of the shakers as well. So let's see here. It's this one here is holding down the pad for just a little bit of a shaker loop. So for this variation, let's get rid of that, shall we? Shift and delete. I'll highlight those and shift and delete. Our metronome is on now. Let's see if I can turn that off. Cool. Yeah, I really need to figure out how to fix that launch quantization so that it's back to the downbeat. I really wish we could get that launch. Maybe if I hold launch and then 1 bar, is that it? No. No. So frustrating on a live stream when it's like a little tiny thing will go wrong, you know what I mean? But then it makes like for the whole rest of the stream to be a little screwy because, something is off. It was working just fine a minute ago, but I must have pressed something that changed that quantize, the launch quantize. I don't use this box often enough to know exactly how to get right back to it. I guess we'll just work with it then. Okay, so let's see here. If we go back into Matrix and Launch, we can kind of get an overview of our clips. So we We've got our 4 on the floor pattern. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. It's not the global settings is the thing. I think we're going to need to go ahead and look it up. So I'm just going to go over to Google real fast here. And in fact, I wonder if we can we sort of, yeah, we can maybe switch that camera. Let's see here. AKAI Force. Sorry, guys. Launch, quantize. This is one of those things that if I don't take the time to figure this out now, the whole rest of the stream will be a little bit screwy. So hopefully I can find this real fast with a Command F and then launch, quantize maybe. Is it in the nope. Nope. Let's see here. This might be a great time to grab a cup of coffee while I try to figure this out, you guys. Sorry, and thank you for your patience. Hey, we got expectors in the chat. We've got Gaz hanging out. All right, the bottom row contains the setting. Yeah, but what do I have to press to get it to swap to the 1 bar? Because if I just press that button that says 1 bar, I know that's my launch quantization right there. Let me see if I can change the camera. Sorry about that, guys. So right here it says 1 bar, and this is what I want. But how much does this cost? Well, that really depends if you can find a new one or a used one. Shift plus 1 bar. That's what I pressed. I really appreciate you being here with that help there. But unfortunately, it's turning the metronome on and off for me is what it's doing when I press Shift and that button right here. It's changing the yeah, it's not changing. It's not doing it. It's not changing the launch. Shift and that button. Yeah, but you can see here I'm holding Shift, right? And I press Shift, and then I press 1 bar, press the 5. Oh, you the man. Look at that. Chat, helping out a brother. Thank you very much, Expectors. I really appreciate that. See, you guys, it's always this tiny little thing, right? I'm just 1 button away, right? It's like if you don't use your gear, like literally as the main piece of gear, those little details always get in the way, you know? Oh, thank you very much for that help. I really appreciate that. Cool. Right on. So yeah, so now we can move any of these clips as we need to, guys. So for instance, if I'm playing, you know, a pattern that does not have a kick drum in it and we're just jamming, right? Now. Okay, thanks, Rustic. I really appreciate that, Expectors. Yeah, right on. So now we can kind of trigger that kick drum as we want to. We can always click a blank spot as well. Let's see here. And now all the clips turn off because I've selected a blank clip and all we're playing is just the kick drum now. Now, if you were to, let's say that this was your intention, right? That you had just a bunch of clips here and your intention was to do stuff live. This is exactly how you do that. All we can do is just press any clip we want, and that track will turn on the next downbeat. So we can bring in the chords. You can even create a rest by tapping an empty spot for the kick drum. Here we go. Hey, Asterix Music in the chat. All right. So say we're playing our groove and we want to switch to a non-4 on the floor pattern. All we do is select it. And 1 click. I can turn the other drums off and go to just this non-4 on the floor part. We turn our main chords off by just selecting an empty clip. And when I want to go back to the groove, I can hit the full row and launch that back in again. So if you can remember where you've put your parts, you can really get in and do a lot of stuff in real time as far as tweaking these sounds and turning things on and off. But you're going to need to remember how you've laid those patterns out. Let's see here. One of the things that I wanted to do today also was to assign a macro. And what is a macro actually? A macro is like when we assign a bunch of different controls to one knob. And then when we move the knob, multiple things happen. Now that sounds a little bit complicated, and it might be, but let's see if we can get that happening today. I've only done this once, and so, see if we can make this happen. I would like it to be, I think, on this track here. No, I don't want, no. Is this going to give me that hard of a time as well that I'm not going to remember this either? Was it? Yeah, here we go. No, that's still not what I want. Mode send. Yeah, this is one click too complicated for me to remember. Is that what the deal is? The track effect on the track? No, maybe we can get this. Okay, cool. So, on the track. No, it's still going to be okay. No worries, no worries, no worries. We can skip on that and move on to something else. Let's see here. I wanted to create a high-pass version of the kick. Right on. Let's do that. We're going to go ahead and copy the standard 4 on the floor kick part. And I'm going to just paste that clip down here at the bottom. And then if I go into, actually, we're going to make a variation of the kick drum sound for this. So here's our main kick drum. All we have to do, this is so easy, right? We have 64 pads here, but I can actually, it's actually 128. It's like shift and up arrow or something, and we get to the other 64 if we need them. But we can just hold copy, touch a pad, and then hit another pad, and now it just copies that sound to the other pad. So I have the kick drum on both pads, exactly the same. But this is how we make variations on the sounds, right? Now I just want to hit edit and click that second hi-hat. Excuse me, kick drum. I don't know why I said hi-hat. And what I want to do is put a high-pass filter on it. Now, for those of you who maybe didn't catch it last week or just don't know, each of these pads is its own individual sampler. So every pad, not only can we add, 4 different effects to each individual pad, but we also have complete controls over the envelope and over the filter setting on every single pad, which is super, super awesome. And what we're going to do for this one is we're just going to high-pass filter it. So I'm going to set the filter to a high-pass filter, and we'll just go ahead and bring some of these lows out until we can really, sort of hear those lows are gone in that kick drum there. So the one beneath it has the lows, and the one above it is a lot thinned out because we've removed those lows. I'm going to maybe put a little tiny bit of resonance on that as well, just for fun. Cool. And now what we can do is go ahead and go into the clip that we're working with here. And all we need to do is just select this kick drum track and transpose it. So it's actually hitting on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see here, A5. And now that particular clip is going to play this high-pass version of the kick instead of our MIDI version of the kick drum. Yeah. Can you guys hear how the bottom end is kind of gone here now? But we can bring it back. In 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoops. I did that incorrectly. What I want to do is go ahead and copy this clip down here. Then I'll copy our main kick clip. That's hard to say. And put it back where it goes. So rather, when I press launch now, we're going to get the full groove because our high-pass kick is hiding out down here on this clip right here. Yeah, so here's our full groove with the meat of the kick drum. But let's say we do a variation. You hear how the bottom end kind of goes away when I choose this high-pass kick? Here we go. Let me bring it back in. guys hear how we can change the rhythm up of what the kick is doing in real time now? And because we got the launch quantization sorted, thanks again, now every time we, choose a different clip to play, it's just going to play on the downbeat of the next bar. So at any time during the mix that we're playing, we can go to this high-passed version of the kick drum or this broken beat version of the kick drum here where it's not playing a full 4 on the floor. Now that we've made a few adjustments, we can go ahead and hit save and then choose project so that everything we've done today is saved and we won't lose anything if anything goes awry. And let's see here. Hey, what's happening, Tony? Thanks for tuning in. Cool. What let's do is let's make a variation of these pads so that when we go into this scene, the pads will change a little bit and we'll start creating some extra variation inside of the track that way. If I select that track that those pads are on and we go into note mode, we can just again, these are just samplers. Every track that I'm using today, except for the bass line, which is the built-in synth, hype synth, I believe, or bassline synth. Every other track, rather, is just a sampler. So we can put the samples on any of these pads that we want, which makes it really, really easy to make variations of our sound. All I need to do is hold copy, touch the pad I want to copy, and then touch the pad I want to paste it to. So copy. And there we have our exact same pads on these two beneath it as well. But now I can edit these pads individually. So if, for instance, if I touch that one, and then I go over to the effects tab, I could put another effect on just this sound. So if we double click that, what I'm looking for is a filter. So we're going to grab the air filter and we're going to put it right on that pad there. And we've got controls like drive. Maybe I'll give it an extra decibel of drive. And we can bring the cutoff way down. Cool. And let's do that same thing to the other pad next to it. 1.11 kilohertz. So I'll choose this pad next to it. I'll go ahead and choose an empty effect slot here, and I'll just choose a filter. I'll try to make the same settings on this filter as I had on the previous pad. 1.11 it was, and I brought the drive up to 1 decibel of drive. Fantastic. So now we have 4 different chord stabs in this bank here, and we have the 2 on top which have the filter wide open, and the ones underneath it which we've now put a low pass filter to remove a lot of the high frequency content from those. Let's see here. I think that we're also going to remove a little bit more low frequency content from these variations down here. You'll hear what I mean in just a second, so bear with me. Yeah, maybe 65 on these. Cool. This way, if we go back into Matrix and Launch, I'm going to play the scene basically before what we're working on, and then we're going to go into this scene here, so you'll hear the difference. Here we have our main groove with the 4 on the floor kick drum, the hats, and 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't actually put the new, whoops, sorry about that. I didn't actually put the new samples into that clip. So we need to make sure that the clip we want to work with is highlighted, and it is. Then I just press the clip button here. And we go into the grid mode. Cool. What I want to do is I'm currently triggering the original notes here. And what I want to do is trigger the notes that we put beneath it instead. So I'm going to highlight these and just transpose them down a couple of notches. And that should do it. Yeah. Fantastic. So now if we go back into our, kind of overview visual mode, and I click the scene before it, we got snow already. All right. That's cool. Here we go. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. Press it. Do you hear how it's a little bit different now because we've taken the 4 on the floor pattern, we've changed that to a broken beat pattern, and we've used those new chord pads that are a lot more subtle in the mix. But we still don't get a whole lot of change. For instance, the top loop is pretty much doing a lot of stuff still, and that clap is still banging away. Maybe it would be nice if we deleted that clap for a stronger variation here. Let's go back to the scene before this. Yes, that's much better. Let's go ahead and edit those variations of our sound again. Oh, I see, we're triggering. Yeah, I'm triggering the wrong pad actually. And so we just need to grab these and we need to grab these and actually transpose them one more note down. And there we go. This one, and then the one next to it. Yeah, there we go. It's hard to see, I'm sure, because we're zoomed out so much. But another neat thing about the Force is that it actually puts the name of the sample as you've named them in this tiny little window over here. So if I select a pad, it highlights the row inside of the sequencer window. So it's kind of easy to see which row I'm trying to put the notes on. But it also will highlight that name on the left-hand side. So if you've got a whole bunch of samples, sometimes you need to really get in there and see the name of what you're working with, and that's really helpful. We'll go ahead and save the project again at this time, and let's see here. I want to do just a tiny little bit more dramatic on this filter, so we're going to just, I think, maybe 3 clicks. Bring the filter down, and then bring this filter up, and 3 clicks down. Cool. And let's go ahead and hear that difference again. I really like to, that's for me, that's a lot of what, song creation is, listening to what you've done before and then hearing it go into what you've just created and make sure that it, does what you need it to do. Go ahead and do some variation on this top clip as well, though. I think what we'll do is maybe get rid of these open hi-hats for this section. Delete those. Whoops. Delete those. Hold on there. Yeah. Sometimes I use the knobs as well for interacting, same as I do with the MPC Live, because it's a touch screen and because you've got other things to interact with. I'm kind of hybrid in the way that I'm interacting with the unit itself. Let's get rid of those extra hats as well for this variation. Whoops. Highlight those and delete. Cool. Yeah, so this is kind of like a breakdown clip, which will be nice to launch us into the next clip. All right. So what I'd like to do is on the next clip, we definitely want to go back into our full 4 on the floor drum pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy that 4 on the floor drum pattern and copy it into the next blank slot. I'll probably want to create like a new top loop for this scene here, this little row. So I'm going to leave that blank, but I think we'll bring our clap back in. And so we'll just kind of copy and paste that. And we're going to want our sub bass to stay, so we'll copy and paste that. And we're going to want those pads to stay, so we'll copy and paste that. And we're going to want our impact to be there at the downbeat, so we'll copy and paste that down as well. We'll go ahead and save what we've done here. And there we go. We'll launch this scene and go ahead and Yeah, I actually don't use the plus minus buttons for really much of anything at all. I'm just really handy with the knob, I think, mostly. Let's go ahead and make this clap a little bit more subtle, shall we? I'm gonna go into the clip. Yeah, let's go ahead and delete these extra claps here. Shift and delete. Shift and delete. Yeah, so we got, you know, variation. We're just more mellow here. I'm gonna go ahead and delete these extra ones as well. Cool. I think, actually, let's delete that clap. I have an idea. Let's go ahead and delete this. Cool. And then let's make sure we're recording on this track. Record arm, and we'll make sure that it's highlighted down here at the bottom. If I go into the note section, I can go ahead and play our pads. Cool, that'll work. I'm going to go ahead and hit record. All right, now what we want to do is I want to make that new part that I've just put in have the exact same swing timing as everything else in the groove. And I've got just a really subtle swing timing on the whole groove. If I hit shift and time correct, it's going to bring up my timing correction window, and I can make sure that it's set to all events and not just the selected events, but all events that are in every single clip. I want those the swing timing, you know, on every single event to be at 52 instead of 50, and I'll click do it. We're just having a really, really subtle amount of, you know, swing and groove here. Yeah, nice. Now that we have, you know, all 8 rows with some information on them, we can go ahead and use the, you know, directional buttons here to start navigating around the matrix here as we need to. The bottom clip is our high-passed kick drum, but I don't want our next scene to use that, so I'm going to just copy that down. 1, and then I'll just delete that there. It's super easy to move and rearrange the actual clips. Again, I just want to stress that the clips themselves are just the MIDI information as to how it should play back the sounds that are inside of your banks. So for instance, our bank 1, you know, is a kick drum bank with these kick drum samples on it. So all of the clips on this track are just different variations of how to play back those specific samples. And again, let's go over to like another bank, right? We're in bank 3 here. This is the claps and, you know, the rim shot, extra snare drum. So all of these clips are just, you know, ways to play back those sounds in that bank specifically. Let's go ahead and go back to the scene before what we were working on. It's that sort of breakdown pattern. This would be a great opportunity for us to put a riser in. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I've got a bunch of different risers that we can choose from longer ones to shorter ones. Let's just sort of check these out and see if any of them fit in our groove. That's a pretty nice one. This is like a 1-bar one right here. I kind of like this one. Let's go ahead and make sure that it plays back the full sample every time. Yeah, it is. All right. And let's just bring a little bit more of those low frequencies off of this sound. And let's put a little bit of reverb send on that sound. And Yeah, it's this one here. So if I go into, go back into the matrix here, make sure that it's selected the right clip, and it is. So if I press clip, now we can go ahead and put that sound in. So if I touch the pad I want, it's going to highlight that pad. And there it is highlighted here. This is just a 1 bar part. So I'm going to want this to come in on the bar 8. And whoops, we'll go ahead and mess with that. I believe I've got that sound now in at the very end. So we're going to play this scene. We'll go to Matrix and launch here. And then at the end of this scene, there'll be that little bit of an uplifting riser to sort of help with the forward momentum and let the listener know that we're transferring into a new sort of a vibe. Yeah, cool. All right, fantastic. Let's go ahead and take our main chords from the beginning and paste them down here. And let's make a variation of those, shall we? So if we go into the bank itself that's housing these samples, again, on pad 1, I've got 4 different chord stabs loaded, and they're set to cycle the playback. So every time I hit the pad, it plays a tiny little variation on that sound. And what I'd like to do is maybe trim one of these samples from a long sample. From like this big long thing. Maybe if we go to the menu, we can go into the sample edit. Maybe we can pick, yeah, like stab 5. Great, cool. And then I can go into the process menu. From here, we can do all sorts of stuff. We can start chopping out pieces of that. We can delete pieces of that. We can add little pieces of silence in there. Say this is a loop, right? And we want to get rid of a snare drum. We would just highlight it and then tell it to be silent in that section. We can extract a part of a sample and make it a new sample. We can normalize it and bring the volume up to all the way before it is going to clip. We can turn this sample to reverse sample, and I think that's what no, we're going to copy it first. We can fade in, fade out. We can time stretch and pitch shift. We can change the gain. But what I want to do is I want to go ahead and copy it to a brand new sample. And we're just going to label this. I'm going to call it short stab 1. Cool. Do it, and then do it. And now all we need to do is just go ahead and make sure that we're highlighted whichever sample we actually want to edit. I'm in the sample editor, and I want to edit that new sample, which I called short stab 1. Now I can start doing all sorts of neat stuff, like we can zoom in a little bit on it and make sure we're on the headphones icon. What I want is I want to change that start point and I want to change that end point so that it's a completely different sound, just a very short, stabby version of that sound. Still a little too long. That's better. We're going to go ahead and process, and I'm going to choose discard, which is going to take the start and end points and delete everything on the edges of those. So now we have just this tiny little sample here. I'm going to bring the end point way back to the beginning, right? Way back to we'll zoom in a little bit so I can see even more. And we're going to choose process, scroll over to fade in. And that way there's no little clicky at the beginning of this sample. We're going to do that exact same thing at the end here. We're just basically taking a longer sample and chopping out a tiny little section of that sample to work with. I've got the end highlighted now, and we're going to choose fade out and do it. Now, when I press play and play the sample, it doesn't have any clicks at the start or the end. I think I'm going to do a little bit more fade out at that end, maybe one more time. Maybe one more, a tiny little bit more at the end. Fade out. Cool. And I want to stress this. This is what I mean by all of the tools inside of this box that you would need to create a finished track from beginning to end. You can copy and paste your samples around. You can record new stuff into it. You can get in here and trim and edit and make new versions of the existing samples. This is a really, really robust sample editor that's built in here. I'm going to raise the volume on this sound just a little bit by doing a gain change. We'll bring it up like 3 decibels, just so it's nice and loud in the mix. And that's now short stab 1 because we copied that and we gave it a new name. Now I can put that sample anywhere I want on any of the banks we've already got, or if I needed to, I could create a new track to put that sound on. But we already have a bank rather, that has our chord stabs on it, so I'm going to put it in the same bank. But what I'll do is I'll put it like in a different location so that it, visually shows us that there's something different there. We're going to go and hit edit, and I'll just pick a pad arbitrarily. Now we can choose sample. I can double tap that, and I can choose from any of the samples that we've got loaded into our session. That's short stab 1 that I want to put there, so I'll just select that. And now there it is. We've taken, our big sample here, and we've just, made that a new sound. They'll look a different variation of that. Now, because every single pad has its own filter settings, I can change the filter on this pad to a high pass filter, and we can bring some of the lows off of this sound. Let's see here. Cool. We can also maybe put an EQ on this sound so I can show you guys what I've been talking about. I keep saying EQ. So we grab this parametric EQ. If I click the little pencil tool, it brings that up. So we've got control over these frequencies. I can maybe take the 100 hertz and put a low shelf filter there, bring out a little bit more low frequencies here. We can go to the low and high cut settings and just kind of turn that on, make sure that we're not getting too much highs on this sound as well. I could also send this to our global reverb. Just this one pad alone, so that any of your pads could have as much or as little of your effects sends as you want. And let's go ahead and play our groove here. But rather, I'm going to delete this main chord stab actually. Yeah. And if I double click there, it's going to give us a new clip. Cool. It knows it's 8 bars already. Kind of messing around with this pad. Enjoy your dinner, Wall. Maybe we'll hit edit, touch our pad again, go back to our filter, take a little bit more low frequency content off, and maybe we'll pan the sound a little bit to the left. Track. There we go. Just kind of trying to figure out what I want this, new sound to do in this little groove here. Kind of like that. And then we rest. Cool. Whoops, I hit undo on accident. Let me hit shift and undo and see if I can redo. Cool, right on. Let's get a little bit more reverb on that sound, and let's also put some delay on it. Now this is, again, really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about producing and mixing outside of the computer, because we're doing it all inside of this machine. That phaser has kind of got my attention. Maybe we'll try that phaser. Oh, yes. But let's bring it down in intensity. I'll bring the mix way down and the depth way down. But can you guys hear that we've got a little bit of movement on that sound now? Yeah, I like that. Let's go ahead and bring that sound up in the mix a little bit now. Cool. And let's still try to put some delay on it. Whoops. We have a few different options for delays inside of this box. We've got analog delays, and we've got analog delays that sync to tempo. We have multi-tap delays and mono delays and delay tape sync. Let's grab that, delay tape sync. Bring the wet down on that. Maybe put this to a quarter note dotted. Ooh, that's nice. Maybe bring a little bit of sound in from tape head number 2. Maybe bring the stereo spread on this up a little bit. And the feedback a little bit so we get more delays happening. Yeah, that's nice. Maybe make it a little bit more wet. And then maybe bring this sound up in the mix a little bit. Ooh. Maybe a little bit louder still. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult on headphones to know, if my levels are where I want them to be. Cool. Let's go back and forth a little bit. That's not supposed to be there. All right. And 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, change. Yeah, actually, I don't think we need the clap here now that we've got that cool new chords. Yeah, let's get rid of that clap because I think the chords really want their own space to breathe here. What we'll do, I think, is we'll save and then maybe just hear this from the beginning so I can tell that when we get to this section, if we're in the right sort of vibe or not. We might kind of a default overview here, and let's just launch this first scene, shall we? Whoops, that's not the first scene, but rather this is. Cool. Here we go. We just want to make sure to launch the next scene when we're one measure before we want it to change. 1, 2, press it now. Guys, hear how we did a little bit of a change up by picking an empty clip for a second? Do that again. Here are the kick stops. Yeah, this is working real nicely. Yeah, I definitely want that new sound to be louder. That's why we hear it in context like that. Because I can hear it after hearing it in context that I want this sound to be quite a bit louder. Yeah. Put some resonance on this filter, I think. Yeah, all right. Still gonna bring that volume up a touch. How's that sounding at home? Is that new sound with all the delay? Is that too loud? Sometimes it's hard to tell on headphones. it's going to go back and forth now a little bit between these scenes. Drop that kick by pressing an empty scene. Yeah, maybe for the top loop here, maybe we could create a top loop and have these shakers doing something. Yeah, let's go ahead and put these shakers in for this section, shall we? To give a little bit of rhythm. Shift, duplicate, duplicate, cool. Hey, shakers. All right. Yeah, that's nice. One. Rest. Bring it back. Cool. So now we're in this row here, and I'm gonna let that play, and then I'm gonna go through the next couple scenes, and we'll see how we're sounding. Really getting there. I think I'd like to yeah, it's over here on our variations of the pad. I think I'd like to filter those down just a little bit more still. Let's try 694 on those. Just trying to tuck our pad sound back in the mix a little bit more per se. And I'm also gonna, take some more of the lows out on these. 162. Cool. I'm just tucking back our pad sound into the mix so that our new sound can kind of have a space of its own to exist in the mix. I hope that makes sense. So here, we can pause the drums, right, by picking empty clips. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3, 4, 7, and we put the clips back in. And now we can bring our drums in and out that way by just picking empty clips for resting. Now let's say the groove is playing, we can just do a breakdown by going back to the first clip. 2, 3, and... And what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I transition between these clips, that it always sounds nice and smooth. So as we continue adding elements, we continue checking that everything is working that we, the way we would expect. 1, 2, press that launch. Here we remove those main chords and start, letting the listener know that we're moving towards a different area. And we'll break it down a little more in 1, 2, 3, and... I think what we'll do in this little breakdown is go ahead and get rid of this extra low tom note that is happening here. Yeah, it's these right here. So in this section, it'd be real nice, I think, to just take those out. But highlight those and delete them. Yeah, so it's just the kick drum, and we're more sort of broken down here. Yeah, that's nice. And 1, 2, launch the next scene. And then here we go, start kind of moving into a different direction, right? But the listener's ears are still trained to what we're doing because we created our new sound out of the existing sound. So this will be a great way to sort of transition into a new section where we add yet another new sound over this groove. And let's create that. We'll go ahead and copy all of these clips down to the next row. Fantastic. Fantastic. So now what we want to do is it'd be nice to go ahead and add something else, maybe a new element over this groove that we've created. And so what let's do is to show that we're, in a new section. Let's go ahead and edit our top loop first, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and maybe put our ride cymbal back in for this. Or maybe just a half hat. That's pretty nice. Yeah, let's do that. And hit record. And it didn't record. Let's find out why. Maybe I just need to arm that track. Cool. Cool, let's go ahead and hit record again. There we go. Got us a couple of notes we need to get rid of. We'll get rid of this one here. Oops. And one more. Yeah, this one here I want to get rid of. Cool. Yeah. Then we've got a little bit more rhythm happening in this section. Get an overview of where your clips are as well if you press the the navigate button up here. So as we keep building more and more clips, and if we had more tracks, we can get an overview of our whole session in that view. But now I think it'd be nice if we were to add like a new chord sound here. So all we need to do is just go to the bank where our chord samples are being housed, which is this bank here. Let's go ahead and save before we do anything else today. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to play the groove, and then I will see about scrolling through some samples inside of the box, and maybe we can load something up. Let's see what we can find here. If I go to load, haven't put any new samples in here in some time, so we'll see what's here. Looks like I have some chords here from one of my sample packs. Maybe something here will suit us. Kind of like that one there. Why don't we just pick this pad here and say load? if we edit this pad here by hitting edit and touching the pad, I can bring up its filter, and I can put a high pass filter on this. All right, you can bring the volume down just a touch and assign it a tiny little bit of reverb. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Let's go ahead and record that in, shall we? And let that ring out. Here we go. All right. Let's go ahead and bring the attack on this sound up just a little so it's a softer. Yeah. And maybe pan this sound just a little bit to the right so that it has its own place in the stereo field. Ooh, yeah. Let's go back and forth a little bit, shall we? Cool. So we've been streaming for almost 2 hours. If anyone has any questions at all, whether they be about the AKAI Force or just music production in general, please feel free to ask those and I'll do my best to answer those. I really appreciate everyone who's tuned in and sticking with me so far. Just a fun Dubby Techno kind of a day on the AKAI Force. For those of you who were here in the beginning, this was created with like 8 different pieces of gear on the table that I recorded into the Force to create this groove. Pick the empty kick to stop, clip to stop the kick for a sec. Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Getting into a more subtle feel. And we're going to change it up. Our new chord sound that we've just brought in, and we brought in that extra half chord sample comes in. I think when the chord sample comes in, we could maybe bring our ride back in very subtly in the background. So I'm gonna hit record and we're gonna bring this ride in as well. In 1, 2, 3, 4. And then lastly, what I want to do is just make sure that all these new notes that we've put in adhere to our timing that we've got going, which is a little bit of groove. So if I hold shift and the time correct, we get that window up. I can make sure that I'm selecting all events and not just what's selected, and I can make sure that we're still set to swing 52, and I can click do it, and now all of the notes that we've just added in will adhere to that timing. We can go ahead and save at this time. All right, and matrix and launch is kind of my main view there. Yeah. This goes really nicely back into the very intro. 2, 3, 4, and we just seamlessly kind of drop back in. This would be a really nice repeatable kind of looping section. If you had other instruments on the table on top of this, not on top of this, I mean, but just, you know, on top of the jam per se, that you could mess with in real time. what I want to do, yeah, is on this clip here, is not bring in quite so much of everything right so early in the track. To highlight this stuff and delete it. Yeah. Cool. So basically, that's like the first, that's like our percussion is just getting introduced, our top loops. And so I don't want that all to come in right at the beginning. Now we've saved it so that when the clap starts for the first time, a little bit of additional percussion will start at that same time. Yeah, so it's a little bit more mellow in the beginning. In fact, a neat thing to do might be to go ahead and attempt to see if we can render out this groove in its entirety to a brand new sample so that we can re-import that and mess with it. This would be called like the technique of resampling. And what we can do is if we click save and then we go to, I'd like to save that clip as audio. And let's see here. Include track and settings. No, I don't want to bypass the effects plugins. Yeah, actually we do, because we're going to put that back on the same track. So I'm not sure how, I don't want audio tail. I think this is all I need to do. Just tell it where to put it. Cool. Okay, so we'll go into, how about miscellaneous samples? And we're just going to call this tops 1. I'll write the BPM here so I'll know for the future that it's 130 BPM. Cool. Do it. And we can save that right in there. Dean's Miss Samples. All right. Now, if I note and we go into, this is our, where we have the top samples. What I want to do is import that loop back in. You'll see why in just a minute. We're going to go ahead and make sure we're on the pad that I want to put it on. And we're going to go load. And then we just need to find that sample from where I saved it in the miscellaneous samples folder. And there it is, tops 130, and there's the sample. All right. Now, let's see, take a look at that sample. If we go into sample edit, there's that tops. I definitely want it louder. Whoops, let's bring it up like, I don't know, 8. Do it. Cool. Yeah, maybe even a little more than that. Whoops. Let's bring it up like 3 more. Awesome. And what I want to do is I want to edit that pad. And remember I said that every pad has its own filter. What I'd like to do is to put a low pass filter on this one so that in the beginning we're sort of filtering our percussion, and then as the track, you know, releases more of the, you know, melodic content of the track, that will sort of open up this percussion as well. Let's see what happens if we start trying to filter this down, shall we? Yeah. And the reason that I did it this way is so that all of the sounds in that loop can be affected by this filter. All right, and all we need to do now is just make sure that when we press the pad, it doesn't play the sample in its entirety every single time, but rather that we have control over it by holding it down. Now what we'll do is just go back into that scene, and the first time here that our tops loop, which again is the hi-hats and shakers and ride, anything but a kick drum and anything but the claps is what I consider on my tops track. We'll just go ahead and go to the clip for that there, and what I want to do is delete all of this actually, so we're gonna just do that. Delete this clip entirely, I guess. Cool. And then we'll put a new clip in here by double tapping and pressing clip. And it knows already that I want it to be an 8-bar loop. Fantastic. If I touch the pad that I want to mess with, it's going to highlight that pad, you know, inside of the window here, so I know which note I want to put my sound on. And let's do that. Duplicate. All right. And now when, yeah, and now when we introduce our tops sound here, they introduce kind of filtered down. So when we bring in the next version, now it's, there's a change there. Let's go ahead and hear this in context, shall we? Or muted or something, or soloed on there. There we go. Cool. Let's see. Out of 10, what do you give the AKAI? What would you compare it against? Let me think about that for a second. Okay, so our top is playing there, but it's so quiet that we're not really hearing it. So I think what we're going to do is a couple of things. I think the first thing we'll do is mess with our chord stab while it comes in the very beginning. It's this pad here, so I'm going to copy that to the next pad over. Then I'm going to hit edit and touch that pad. We're going to go to this pad, and we're just going to low pass filter this pad as well, so that when we first introduce the chords to the listener, that they'll be a little bit more low pass filtered in the very, very beginning. That way our intro of the song has some movement and we're sort of flowing into the track. Yeah, we don't want to get super dramatic with this, but we want it to be, down there somewhere. And then all we need to do is just change this from triggering our first original chord to now trigger the new version of it instead. So let's go ahead and go back into Matrix and launch so we can hear what we've done here. Right, those top loops still first. So if I edit on the top loops, close. So if I edit on those top loops by going into note mode and then selecting that top loop, I'm going to bring the volume up on this sound a little bit more. Yeah. And then maybe we'll put an EQ on it. Cool. All right. Yeah, that's getting there. I want those to be a little louder still. So that we're just tucking them into the back of the mix. Yeah, edit. Yeah, you see how we can hear those, but they're kind of tucked back into the mix? Yeah, right on. Let's see here. Wrong camera. Okay, cool. I would say, for me personally, in how I'm using the AKAI Force, since their last updates have gotten it fully MIDI compatible in and out, and you can, use this with all of your other MIDI gear. For me, this is a 10. This is absolutely the best box that I know of personally to produce and mix finished music outside of Ableton. The only other box or boxes that I would compare this to, me personally, would be any of the other AKAI units that are recent, like the MPC-1, the MPC-2, the MPC-X, the MPC Live, and the Force. They all pretty much have the same basic engine in them. They're a little bit different. Like I mentioned earlier, the MPC Live doesn't have the big flagship synthesizer inside of it that the Force has, but it does have the other 3 synthesizers inside of it. I don't know the Deluge personally. I actually have a few of my samples in one of those updates. I was able to get some of my sounds in that box, which was really cool. But I don't have a Deluge here. Every time that I've seen people work with that unit, it just doesn't really do it for me personally in the way that it's laid out. I know people who have it really love the Deluge, and I don't have anything against it. I don't think it can do quite what you can do with these AKAI boxes. And I know I'm sort of a broken record with this as well, but where you can load 4 individual effects onto one sound, that means if I want to get super surgical with the EQ, I can load 4 different EQs on one sound. I mean, you can't do that kind of production in any other hardware box that I know of other than a laptop and Ableton, if you get my drift. So you can really just get in here and produce. You got a master bus here inside of the Force. We've got 8 different sub mixes as well. So you've really got the tools that you need to create those full and finished pieces of music using this box. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to ask those. I'm going to play this from the beginning again and see how we're doing in that little bit of finesse I worked into the intro part. Hey, Martin, thanks for tuning in. I don't know how quite to say your name, but Learner Zek, thanks very much for tuning in as well. Yeah, I like how that hi-hat now kind of feels crusty in the background, sort of. Oh, that's what we need. That's what we need. We need sort of a riser in this scene here that sort of builds that tension. So when we drop the kick drum and the beat here in the next scene, it sort of makes a little bit more sense that we're building up the listener's anticipation for this drop. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and put an effect. And again, this is why I listen to things in context, you know, sort of from beginning to end as I'm producing, so that I can find those empty spots where things might need to go and get in there and, you know, take care of that. If I bring up the note mode here, we've got some other risers that I put in. And I think this standard 4-bar pumping riser that I use, I have a plugin on the desktop. It's kind of an older plugin now, and it's called Synth. And it has a really nice noise, a white noise in it. And I use that with a sidechain pumping effect to create sort of a pumping noise riser. It sounds like this. Here's that sort of pumping effect built into that riser. This is a 4-bar riser at our tempo, and I think what we'll do is just hit edit, touch that pad, go over to the effects tab and send this to some reverb. Also, we'll put an EQ on this sound. Now I'm putting the EQ just on this one pad here. It is possible to put up to 4 effects on an entire bank, so they would be affecting all of your sounds in that bank as well, which is again what I really mean by producing and mixing. You've got all the tools you need. Okay, EQ, right, so parametric EQ, select and bring this up. And what I want to do with this is I want to just remove from this riser any frequencies that are under about 600 hertz. I just want the high energy of the higher frequencies of this sound. We don't want it like competing with any of our low frequencies in the mix or anything like that. And now all I need to do is, yeah, we've already put that sound in. Let's see if it sounds all right. Hear that riser now, creating tension. Then we sort of launch, you know. I think that the riser is a little bit too loud, so we're gonna bring the riser up. I'm gonna bring the volume on it down just a little bit, like 1 decibel. I'm also gonna pan it a little bit to the left. So each of these pads, when you assign a sample to them, you can pan each of these and get a really nice stereo, you know, mix. These loads, the AKAIs load full stereo samples as well, full quality. You can load 24-bit stereo samples in here, so they're not limited to mono only. Are there any things you would like to see in the Force? For me personally, as a sound designer and as a sample maker, I really just like to be able to record my own sounds in. I think that the features it's got right now pretty much get me to where I want to go. The only thing that I really needed up until a couple of updates ago was for them to get their MIDI routing sorted so we can use it with our external gear and route our MIDI controllers or our MIDI sequencers to the different tracks in here if we want to. And that's all fully functional now, and it's working exactly the way you would expect. The fact that we can load, you know, 4 different samples to a pad and either play back those samples like 1, 2, 3, 4, or randomly. I mean, there's just so much you can do here. There really isn't anything that I've come across personally that I wish it could do that it doesn't do. They've even added an arrangement mode, which I have not explored yet. I also remember I tried to mess with the macros a little bit earlier, but there's again just some sort of setting I'm missing as to how we set that up. I don't quite remember, but you can go in and on each of these knobs we can assign it to do just about anything we wanted. So we can make low pass filters on like our chords track when we move the knob, or like add delay or something when we move a knob. It's all really, really customizable. The macros in the beginning were really pedestrian and you couldn't really set them up, but now you can really get in here and you can set like the start and end points, for instance, on the filters. So when you roll a knob down, the filter only closes so much, but not all the way. It's just, yeah, as far as what I would need in here, I really can't think of anything. For me personally, it's got all of the tools that I need. Um, Unfortunately, it doesn't load any sort of like plugins or virtual instruments. It's only just limited to the plugins that it comes with at this time. But as far as effects are concerned, you've got, everything you could really need inside of here. The effects, I would say, are not like pristine, super duper desktop quality. Like, you're not going to get a $200 desktop reverb plugin, for instance. The higher quality our plugins are, the more CPU they're going to take, and they have to keep that in mind, when they're when they're creating a self-contained box like this, how much, CPU their plugins will be allowed to take. So their plugins, I would say, are very usable and very robust. They're just not that like, superior. They're not the highest quality desktop plugins that money can buy, for instance. But you can absolutely export the entire session out and then get that inside of Ableton, where you're able to use those type of effects as well. So even if you're not really into the sound of their effects, you can still export like an entire session like this now right into Ableton. What's the learning curve on something like this? Well, to be honest with you, I would say it's massive. Is basically what I would say. Is a huge learning curve. My phone seems to be stopped, so maybe I can just grab this for now. And the reason I say that is because it is a full DAW. You can really do as much as you want. You can just keep adding tracks and keep adding things. But the bonus about using stuff like this is we don't need to know every single thing that the box can do before we can actually really get some use out of it. There's still quite a lot of features in here that I'm not using personally, like the arrangement mode, for creating full and finished songs as well, all sorts of stuff. So you can get in and just start dropping samples in here and using, like for instance, if you don't like a sample-based workflow at all and you just want to use their inbuilt synthesizers, that's really doable here as well. Including their new drum synthesizer that we didn't check out today because I haven't updated to the most recent version yet. But yeah, I would say the learning curve is probably pretty large, but a lot of the concepts that you need to know to run this box are just general production knowledge. And the things that you learn along the journey with the box like this are absolutely relatable to other samplers, other groove boxes, and actual DAWs and stuff like Ableton as well. For sure. I mean, you could take I've been at this kind of thing for like 20 plus years, and a box like this, you can, really make like your main production workflow and then explore all of the depths of that box for like years. It's something that, you would really, get out of it what you put into it, I think is how they say that there. I think they're going to keep up the plugin additions, asterisk music. Somebody on like one of the NAMM videos where they were showing the drum synthesizer when they load it. I guess you can see on that loading screen that there was yet some other kind of synthesizer or synthesizers inside of that model. So I definitely know that they're planning to keep putting more synthesizers and stuff, like more of their own sounds and plugins inside of these. And as far as I know, all of the synthesizers pretty much make it into all of their other boxes eventually, you know, because the firmware inside of these is all pretty much the same. I mean, it's very subtly different between each box, but you got the MPC Live 1 and 2, the MPC 1, the Force, and then did I say the 1? And then all of those, I mean, they're all pretty much the same. So, like the people who have the AKAI MPC Live really want that hype synth that's in the Force, and you know, it may come to the MPC Live. I think it will at some point, you know, because everything else kind of just makes its way to the other boxes sooner or later. There's only so many people at AKAI updating the code, you know, they're a little slow. How do you get external samples in? What you can do is you can either record them in manually from the back. It's got like two 1/4-inch inputs where we can adjust that input level, and the recording quality is fantastic. Or we can plug it into your computer, and then you can just drag and drop samples into the hard drive. It comes with a hard drive built in, but it's, you know, relatively small. And I kind of have a bug in my mind where I'm thinking, if anything happens to that internal hard drive, what if it crashes or something and my samples and my work are on that hard drive? Well, then I would lose those. So I've actually installed a second hard drive inside of the Force where I've got all of my samples and projects installed. And the way I'm thinking about it is that if anything happened to the box itself and maybe the hard drive in here got corrupted, that my samples and my projects would still be able to be just taken out and put into a different box or something. But yeah, I definitely love being able to record manually into these. If you want to see a little bit about how that works, definitely check out the stream I did last Sunday with the AKAI MPC Live, because it's pretty much the same system, and I recorded all of the parts in manually last week. We skipped that step this week to get more into playing with the box itself rather than recording all this stuff in. But yeah, it's just, you know, it's one step at a time, like you would learn anything else. At first, you know, it takes a few days, and maybe you'll look something up and then have to kind of go, you know, looks like my iPhone is shot out there, but have to go back and, you know, read another, you know, thing to figure that out. But once you start picking up the technique and how to actually just, you know, work with the track, especially in a sample-based workflow. I mean, I've just got, you know, these are just drum samplers. I've got, you can see the pads that are empty, and the pads that are not empty are a little bit lit up. And you can just scroll through the banks, see where your sounds are, you can put samples anywhere you want. I just love being able to either record stuff in or load samples from my sample packs and whatnot. And you've got, you know, each track with tons and tons and tons of spots to put those samples. And then all we do is just, you know, arrange those samples out inside of these little piano roll windows, the same thing that you would get inside of Ableton. So you can like play stuff in live and then get in here and finesse it if you want to, make changes to the velocities and stuff like that. We even have a new way to do automation in here, so we can like move the filter and it can record that, all that kind of stuff. Is it an SSD drive? Yes, it is. And I don't know what the max size is. I think it's at least, it's very, very large, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's like 250 or 500 gigs at least. I'm not 100% sure on that. But for instance, I think it's at least 250 gigs. I have so many samples inside of the internal drive, and like, you know, I still have plenty of room on those as well. We've loaded quite a few samples into this session, and we're really, you know, the CPU itself is only at 16-17%. Even if we play the stuff, it's going to get loud. It only goes up to about 18-19% CPU. And there's plenty of more room to load in more samples. Let's see here. I think that's about it today, guys, unless there's any more questions. We've been going for about 2 hours and 20 minutes, and we did quite a bit of readjusting to the groove here, which I sampled in from 8 pieces that were on the table when we started. Let's see, take a look at my notes here if there's anything else that I want to do before we call it today. We got that bass in, some percussion variations. What's happening with these scenes down here? We never did bring that clap back in, I see. Maybe we need to do that before we call it today. Let's see. So our full groove here, claps playing and everything. Then we start moving it down by removing the chords. Go into the sort of broken beat kick pattern now. Yeah. I'm gonna make sure I got that labeled properly because we don't now. It just says kick 1, but this is actually the broken beat. This is actually really neat as well, that you can get in here and label all of the clips. I don't know how well you can actually see that. I know it's a little bit blurry because we're kind of got a large box today, but you can get in here and you can label all of the clips with a name, so that I know you can't see like that on the pads down here, but looking at the screen up here, I've got names for all of these clips. And I want you to remember that because it's a touch screen, let's say we're playing this clip here, right? At any time, I can just touch any of these clips down here on the, launching section, and at the beginning of the next measure, they'll launch. But the same thing is true if I touch anything on the touch screen up here. I can touch any pads I want at any time, and at the beginning of the next measure, those will start playing. And again, if I want the whole row to start playing, we just use these launch buttons on the right-hand side. That's kind of a fun thing that you can do, is you can sort of get out of your arranged workflow by moving around to some other clips, but then getting back into your arranged workflow using these launch buttons over here, and launch a complete scene again and get back into what you intended. So let me just, again, check on this clap sound. Sort of breaking that down there. Then we add our new chord. And then we add our new sound. And I think we could probably bring the clap back in here. So I'm going to copy that down. And then we're just going to edit this clip. Let's see here. It's this one here. So I'll make sure that's highlighted. All right. And what I want to do is I want to just take some of these extras off of this as well, so that it's mostly just the main clap. So I'll highlight the stuff I don't want and delete that. Yeah, cool. So that extra snare is gone now. I'm going to delete those extra claps, so it's just the one main clap. Whoops. There we go. Delete. Cool. So can you use it in a park bench in the sunshine? That's the thing. It doesn't come with a battery like the MPC Live, which is definitely a bonus to the MPC Live, is that you can just pick that thing up with a pair of headphones and that battery lasts for hours, you guys. It's totally awesome. But this thing here, I've seen a lot of people asking what's the right battery pack to run this off of. I don't personally leave the studio a whole lot, so I don't know specifically, but there definitely are some power banks. I think you'll need, a pretty substantial power bank. My dog's running around here. You about ready to call it, dude? A pretty substantial power bank that has like a grounded plug, something like that, and you would definitely be able to use this in the park. But I mean, you got to carry that around with you now. You know what I mean? Hey, what's happening, Vortex? I had 3 cameras a minute ago, but I seem to have lost one. I'm going to just take a moment, actually, and see if I can get that back, because this same thing happened to me last week, and it would be really awesome if I could sort this to where if this happens in the future, that I can still get that camera back. And let's find out. Did I do it? Looks like kind of. Basically, what I'm doing here, guys, is I've got 3 cameras today. I've got an iPhone 8 Plus that I'm talking to. Looks like I was able to reset the camera, so check. All right, because last week or maybe the week before, I'm not sure now, it gave me that problem. So what I have here is I'm using this as a webcam. Okay, I'm hosting the stream with OBS on my Mac, and I've got this is an iPhone 8 Plus, and it's plugged into the Mac via a USB cord. I'm running an app called Epoch Cam, and that enables me to use the iPhone as a webcam inside of OBS. And then here we have the overhead shot, which is a Brio webcam, which I just picked up. And I don't like this as much as I like using the iPhones, actually, because it kind of puts a little bit of, can you see those like tracers on my hands, for instance? I'm not really sure why it does that. It's a little bit hard to set up. But then over here, I'm using my wife's iPhone, which has to run a separate iPhone to webcam app because you can't run Epoch Cam 2 times with 2 separate phones. So this phone is actually running an app called iRuin webcam. I don't know if I'm saying that right. RUIN, like, or IUN, iRuin, and that allows it to function as a webcam. The only other thing is that I've got extra lenses on both of these iPhones to get the shot a little bit bigger. These are the Moment lenses, and they're very expensive, but they're also very nice. It changes, so you can actually get the whole room in the shot per se. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so yeah, 3 cameras, right? That's so cool. I went from doing it specifically with the iPhone 8 Plus, using the YouTube app for the first, I don't know, 8 or 10 weeks of doing these Sunday live streams. But that limits the stream to a maximum resolution of 720 pixels. I guess that's just a limitation of using the iPhone and with the YouTube app. But here, now that I'm using my Mac to stream to YouTube over OBS and get these extra, shots in, this is really awesome. All right. So we've been going for quite some time. If anyone has any more questions at all, I am definitely here to answer those still. All right. Yeah, the iPhone 8 Plus is literally the best camera I've ever had. I mean, I really, really love these iPhones. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, right on. Okay, you guys. So we are going to go ahead and call it. I think I got pretty much most of the stuff on the list done today. A few things we weren't able to get to, and I really want to give an extra shout out to Expectus. Thank you so much, Joris. I really appreciate that help with the timing quantization in the beginning of this stream, because like without that, I was having a hard time figuring it out, and without that little bit of extra help, it would have, stream could have gone a little bit more sideways. This is a great community. All these people that keep tuning in every week and hanging out with me, we're just having fun. I'm trying to keep these Sunday streams super casual. So many YouTubers now are really about this, editing, where it makes everything seem like they only spent 5 minutes and, out comes this amazing thing. But trust me, they spend a lot more than 5 minutes, and that's why I want to do these kind of things where things are happening in real time. There's struggles, there's triumphs, all that kind of stuff, because this is what it is. I've been at this for 20 years, and nothing ever goes as expected, and nothing ever goes smoothly. You always need to like hopscotch around things. Maybe the sound isn't working, or the EQ isn't doing what you thought. I mean, it's never smooth. So I want to show that side of things as well, as not just the magic of everything being done all the time. All right. Yeah. Cool deal. All right, you guys. So we'll definitely be back next Sunday. There's been a little bit of a hiccup in my custom Eurorack case being finished, so it's going to be a little ways off still. And I'm definitely going to attempt to keep utilizing this amount of desk space while we still have it, because once that rack gets here, it's going to be taking up the majority of the desk. All right. Until next week, thanks for watching. Next Sunday it in. Alright, let's see here. If I can just figure out how to... Got a lot of stuff open on the screen here. Okay, is it... where is it? Here it is. Okay. Thanks very much.